Elena stared at the clock for the 100th time that night. 11:45 p.m. She sighed deeply, knowing that any minute now she'd hear it. "Mama! Mama!" Mateo's heart-wrenching scream echoed through the house. Elena jumped out of bed and rushed to her 5-year-old son's room. Opening the door, she found him curled up in the corner of his bed, trembling and tearful. "Shh, my love. Mama's here," Elena whispered, hugging Mateo tightly. "Another nightmare?" Mateo nodded wordlessly, burying his face in her chest. "Do you want to tell me about it?" Elena asked gently, stroking his hair. "No, I can't," Mateo murmured between sobs. Elena frowned. This was the 5th night in a row that Mateo had woken up screaming, and each time he refused to talk about his nightmares. "It's okay, honey. You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Elena said, rocking him gently. "Do you want to sleep with me tonight?" Mateo shook his head vigorously. "No, Mama, I want to stay here." Elena was surprised. Usually Mateo would jump at the chance to sleep in Mama's bed after a nightmare. "Are you sure, my love? You know I don't mind if you sleep with me." "I'm sure," Mateo insisted, his voice barely a whisper. "Okay," Elena said, kissing his forehead. "Let's try to get you back to sleep." As she tucked Mateo in, Elena noticed that he kept looking nervously at the half-open door. "Do you want me to close the door, honey?" Mateo nodded quickly. "Yes, please, and can you leave the light on?" Elena frowned again. Mateo had never been afraid of the dark before. "Of course, my love. The light will stay on all night," Elena promised, gently closing the door. Back in her room, Elena found herself face-to-face with Roberto, her husband of 6 months. "Another nightmare?" Roberto asked, rubbing his tired eyes. Elena nodded, biting her lip with worry. "It's the 5th night in a row, Roberto. I'm starting to get really worried." Roberto came over and hugged her. "Kids go through phases, Elena. Mateo's probably just processing all the recent changes in his life." Elena stiffened slightly in Roberto's arms. "You mean our marriage?" Roberto sighed. "I didn't mean it like that. But yes, our wedding, the move to this new house. It's a lot of change for a little boy." Elena pulled away from the embrace, crossing her arms over her chest. "It's been 6 months, Roberto. Mateo seemed to have adjusted well until a week ago." "Kids are complicated, honey. Sometimes it takes them time to process things," Roberto replied with a shrug. Elena didn't seem convinced. "I don't know, Roberto. Something's not right. Mateo's not himself lately." "What do you mean?" Roberto asked, raising an eyebrow. Elena began pacing the room. "He's quieter, more withdrawn. He doesn't want to play at the park like he used to. And now these nightmares. Roberto, I'm really worried." Roberto sat down on the edge of the bed, watching his wife intently. "Elena, I think you're overreacting a bit. All kids go through phases." Elena stopped short, turning to face her husband. "Overreacting? Roberto, I know my son. Something is wrong. I can feel it." "And what do you think it could be?" Roberto asked, a touch of irritation in his voice. Elena hesitated for a moment. I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Roberto stood up and approached Elena. "Look, I know you're worried, but maybe what Mateo needs is a little normalcy. Maybe we should try to keep his routine as stable as possible." Elena nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right, but if this continues, I'm taking him to the pediatrician." "Fair enough," Roberto agreed. "Now why don't we try to get some sleep?" The following morning, Elena woke up early to prepare breakfast. As she was beating eggs for omelets, she heard Mateo's cautious footsteps coming down the stairs. "Good morning, my love," Elena greeted with a forced smile. "How did you sleep after, well, you know?" Mateo shrugged, sitting down silently at the kitchen table. Elena noticed the dark circles under his eyes and her heart sank. "How about we do something fun today?" Elena proposed, trying to sound cheerful. "We could go to the zoo or maybe to the movies. What would you like to do?" Mateo looked up, his eyes filled with a sadness that Elena had never seen in him before. "I don't want to go out, Mama. Can we just stay home?" Elena set down the bowl of eggs and went over to her son, kneeling in front of him. "Mateo, honey, what's wrong? You know you can tell me anything, right?" Mateo nodded slowly but remained silent. "Is it the nightmares?" Elena pressed gently. "Is something scaring you?" For a moment it seemed as if Mateo was about to speak. He opened his mouth, his eyes welling up. But just then, Roberto walked into the kitchen. "Good morning, family," Roberto exclaimed cheerfully. "What's for breakfast?" Mateo's mouth snapped shut, and he lowered his gaze to the table. Elena felt a stab of frustration, but she stood up, forcing another smile. "I was just about to make omelets," she replied. "Mateo, do you want to help me beat the eggs?" Mateo shook his head without looking up. "Come on, champ," Roberto said, ruffling Mateo's hair. "Your mama loves it when you help her in the kitchen." Mateo flinched visibly at Roberto's touch, something that didn't go unnoticed by Elena. "It's okay, Roberto," Elena interjected quickly. "If Mateo doesn't want to help, it's fine. Why don't you go take your shower while I finish breakfast?" Roberto seemed surprised for a moment, but then he nodded. "Sure, honey, I'll be quick." Once Roberto left the kitchen, Elena sat down next to Mateo. "Honey," she began softly, "you know you can trust me, right? If there's something bothering you, anything at all, you can tell me." Mateo looked up, his eyes filled with a fear that made Elena's heart race. I want to tell you, Mama, but I'm scared." Elena took her son's hands in hers. "Scared of what, honey? Mama will always protect you, no matter what." Mateo opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of the shower upstairs made him stop. He shook his head vigorously. "I can't, Mama. Please don't ask me anymore," Mateo pleaded, his eyes welling up. Elena felt her concern morph into a chilling fear that ran down her spine. Something was very, very wrong. "It's okay, my love," she said, hugging Mateo tightly. "I won't pressure you, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, always." The rest of the day passed in a strange calm. Elena watched Mateo like a hawk, noticing every flinch, every nervous glance, every time he recoiled when Roberto got too close. That night, after putting Mateo to bed, Elena sat in the living room, pretending to read a book while she waited. Like clockwork, at 11:45 p.m., Mateo's scream ripped through the house. Elena raced to her son's room, finding him in the same position as the night before, curled up in the corner of his bed, trembling. "Shh, my love, Mama's here," Elena whispered, hugging Mateo. "I don't want to sleep, Mama. Please don't make me sleep," Mateo sobbed. Elena felt her heart breaking. "Mateo, my life, you need to rest. How about if... Everything all right in here?" Roberto's voice from the doorway interrupted Elena. Mateo immediately tensed in his mother's arms. "Yes, Roberto," Elena replied, noticing her son's reaction. "I've got this. You can go back to bed." Roberto frowned. "Are you sure? I can stay with him if you want to get some rest." "No!" Mateo suddenly shouted, clinging to Elena tightly. "I want Mama. Only Mama." Roberto looked surprised and somewhat hurt by Mateo's reaction. "Okay, champ. Mama will stay with you. Good night." Once Roberto left, Elena tried to calm Mateo down. "Honey, why did you react like that with Roberto? He just wanted to help." Mateo shook his head frantically. "I don't want him to help. I don't want him near me. Please, Mama, don't let him near me." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "Mateo, has Roberto done something to you? Has he hurt you in any way?" Mateo was silent for a long moment. Then, in a barely audible whisper, he said, I can't tell you, Mama. He said that if I did, he would hurt you." Elena felt the world stop spinning around her. Her mind raced with a million thoughts at once, but she forced herself to remain calm for her son's sake. "Mateo, look at me," Elena said firmly, taking his face in her hands. "No one, absolutely no one can hurt me, and no one has the right to hurt you. I need you to tell me what's going on. I promise I'll protect you, no matter what." Mateo stared at his mother with eyes filled with fear and doubt. "But he said..." "Forget what he said," Elena interrupted. "I'm your mother, and my job is to protect you. Nothing you tell me will change that. Please, honey, I need to know what's happening so I can help you." Mateo took a deep breath and began to speak in a low voice, so low that Elena had to lean in to hear him. And with each word, Elena felt her world crumble, but she remained strong for her son. When Mateo finished speaking, he was trembling uncontrollably. Elena held him tightly, her own tears mingling with his. "I'm so sorry, my love," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise, this is over. No one will ever hurt you again. Do you believe me? She asked, her voice small and scared. Of course I believe you, Elena replied without hesitation. And we're going to fix this. I promise. Elena stayed with Mateo until he finally fell asleep, exhausted from crying and the weight of his secret. Once she was sure he was sleeping soundly, she slipped out of the room, her mind racing. In the hallway, she came face to face with Roberto. Is everything okay? He asked, his voice full of feigned concern. I heard you talking for a long time. Elena had to use all her willpower not to lash out at him. Instead, she forced a smile. Yes, everything's fine, she lied. Mateo finally told me about his nightmares. I think he'll be able to sleep better now. As she turned to go to her room, Elena knew she had a difficult road ahead, but she also knew, with absolute certainty, that she would do whatever it took to protect her son, even if it meant confronting the monster lurking under her own roof. Roberto nodded, seemingly relieved. That's good. Are you coming to bed soon? I'll be up in a bit, Elena replied. I'm just going to get a glass of water first. Roberto shrugged and headed back to the bedroom. Elena descended the stairs, her mind racing, frantically formulating a plan. She knew she couldn't confront Roberto directly, not without proof. And above all, she needed to keep Mateo safe. In the kitchen, Elena picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she'd have to use. Hello, Maria. It's Elena, Carlos's sister. I know it's late, but I need your help. It's an emergency. Elena continued speaking in a hushed voice to her sister-in-law, Maria. I need you to come and pick up Mateo early tomorrow morning. Tell Roberto you're taking him to the park or something. I can't explain everything now, but I need you to trust me. It's about Mateo's safety. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Elena, you're scaring me. What's going on? Elena took a deep breath. I'll explain everything when I see you. Please, Maria, it's urgent. All right, Maria replied after a moment. I'll be there at 8 a.m. Do you need me to bring anything? Just yourself, Elena said, feeling a sliver of relief. And Maria, thank you. After hanging up, Elena stared out the kitchen window, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How hadn't she realized sooner? How had she allowed this to happen? Elena? Roberto's voice startled her. Are you okay? You've been down here for a while. Elena turned, forcing a smile that she hoped was convincing. Yeah, just thinking, about Mateo and his nightmares. Roberto came over and placed a hand on her shoulder. Elena had to use all her willpower not to pull away. Don't worry so much, honey, Roberto said with a smile that now seemed sinister to Elena's eyes. Kids get over these things. Let's go to bed. Yeah. Elena nodded, following Roberto upstairs. That night she pretended to sleep, her body rigid, alert for any movement from Roberto. The next morning, Elena woke up early, preparing breakfast as if it were a normal day. When Mateo came downstairs, she hugged him tightly. Good morning, my love, she whispered. Aunt Maria is coming to get you today to take you to the park. Would you like that? Mateo's eyes lit up slightly, but then he looked nervously towards the stairs. But what about him? Elena knelt down in front of her son. Don't worry about him. Trust Mama. Okay, it's going to be all right. Just then, the doorbell rang. Elena opened the door to find Maria standing on the doorstep. Hello, family, Maria exclaimed with forced cheerfulness. Who wants to go to the park? Me, Mateo shouted, rushing towards his aunt. Roberto came down the stairs at that moment. Oh, Maria, what a surprise! I didn't know you were coming. Maria smiled, though Elena noticed the tension in her eyes. I thought I'd take Mateo to the park, give you two some time alone. Roberto seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then he nodded. Sure, that sounds good. Have fun, champ. Elena hugged Mateo once more before he left with Maria. I love you, my love. Remember that always. Once they were gone, Elena turned to Roberto. I think we need to talk. Roberto looked at her curiously. About what? Elena took a deep breath. About Mateo. About his nightmares. About you. Roberto's expression changed instantly, a flash of surprise and something darker crossing his face. What are you talking about? I know what you've been doing, Roberto, Elena said, her voice trembling slightly. Mateo told me everything last night. Roberto paled for a moment, but then his expression hardened. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena. Mateo's just a child. He's probably confused or... Don't you dare, Elena shouted, her fury finally surfacing. Don't you dare insinuate that my son is lying. Roberto took a step towards her, his voice low and threatening. Think carefully about what you're doing, Elena. You really think anyone will believe you? Over me? Elena stepped back, but kept her gaze steady. I have proof, Roberto, and not just Mateo's testimony. It was a bluff, but Elena needed to buy time. Roberto seemed to hesitate for a moment. What do you want? He finally asked. I want you gone, Elena replied. Right now. Pack your things and leave. Don't you ever come near Mateo or me again. Roberto stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Finally, without a word, he turned and went upstairs. Elena listened to him moving around in the bedroom, opening and closing drawers. Meanwhile, she ran to the study, opened her laptop, and frantically typed an email to her lawyer, detailing everything Mateo had told her and requesting an immediate restraining order. Half an hour later, Roberto came downstairs, a suitcase in hand. He stopped in front of Elena. This isn't over, he said quietly. Elena stood her ground. Yes, it is. If you try to come near us again, I'll go straight to the police. Roberto stared at her for a moment longer, then walked out the front door. Elena waited until she heard the sound of his car driving away before collapsing on the couch, trembling uncontrollably. Hours, which felt like days, passed before Elena heard Maria's car pulling up outside. She ran to the door, opening it just as Mateo was about to ring the doorbell. Mama! Mateo shouted, launching himself into her arms. Elena hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. My love, my brave little boy. Maria watched them from the doorway, her expression a mixture of worry and confusion. Elena, what's going on? Where's Roberto? Elena looked at her sister-in-law over Mateo's head. He's gone, Maria, and he's not coming back. That night, after Mateo finally fell asleep in his own bed, Elena sat in the living room with Maria, telling her everything in tears and broken whispers. Oh, Elena, Maria said, hugging her sister-in-law. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? Elena wiped her tears. You've already done so much, Maria. Thank you for taking Mateo today. I need to find a therapist for him and a lawyer, and probably move out of this house. Maria nodded. You can count on me for anything, and I'm sure Carlos will want to help too, when he finds out. Elena felt a wave of gratitude towards her family. Thank you, Maria. I don't know what I would do without you. That night, as she watched Mateo sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, Elena made a silent promise. Never again, my love. Never again will I let anyone hurt you. We'll get through this together. I promise. Elena woke with a start, her heart pounding. She glanced at the clock. 3:27 a.m. The silence of the night was absolute, but something had woken her. She rose stealthily and went to Mateo's room. Opening the door, she found him sitting up in bed, clutching his favorite teddy bear. Mateo, are you okay, honey? Elena whispered. Mateo looked up, his eyes shining in the darkness. I had another dream, Mama. Elena sat down next to him, putting an arm around his small shoulders. Do you want to tell me about it? Mateo hesitated for a moment before speaking. I dreamt that he came back, that he climbed through the window, like a monster. And... Shh, my love, Elena interrupted, hugging him tightly. He's not coming back, I promise. But what if he does? Mateo insisted, his voice trembling. What if he comes when you're asleep and you can't protect me? Elena felt her heart clench. She knew she had to do something to make Mateo feel safe again. I have an idea, she said, forcing a smile. How about if we install a special alarm in your room? That way, if anyone tries to come in, we'll know right away. Mateo's eyes widened with curiosity. Like in the spy movies? Elena chuckled softly. Something like that. How about you have your own security camera? We can watch it from my phone and make sure everything is okay. Mateo seemed to consider it for a moment. Could I see the camera too? Of course, Elena replied. We can set it up together tomorrow. How does that sound? For the first time in weeks, Elena saw a spark of excitement in her son's eyes. Yeah, we can do it as soon as we wake up. Elena smiled, kissing Mateo's forehead. Of course, my love. Now, do you think you can go back to sleep? Mateo nodded, snuggling under the covers. I love you, Mama. And I love you, my brave boy, Elena whispered, staying with him until he drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Elena and Mateo headed to the nearest electronics store. As they walked through the aisles, Elena noticed that Mateo was clinging to her hand more tightly than usual. "You okay, honey?" she asked, stopping for a moment. Mateo looked around nervously. "What if we see him here, Mama?" Elena knelt in front of him, looking him in the eye. "Mateo, listen to me. If you ever see him anywhere, you tell me right away. I'll take care of everything, okay?" Mateo nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "Besides," Elena added with a mischievous grin, "we're secret agents on a special mission, remember? No one can know who we are." This seemed to cheer Mateo up, and he started walking on tiptoes, looking around as if he were in a spy movie. As they were choosing a camera, a sales clerk approached them. "Can I help you with anything?" he asked politely. Elena felt Mateo tense beside her. "Yes, we're looking for an indoor security camera. Something easy to install, and that can be monitored from a phone." The clerk nodded, showing them several options. As he talked about the features of each model, Elena noticed that Mateo seemed increasingly uneasy. "What's wrong, honey?" she whispered. Mateo leaned close to her ear. "Mama, what if the camera doesn't work? What if he breaks it?" Elena bit her lip, considering how to answer. Finally, she turned to the clerk. "Excuse me, do you have any models that are particularly sturdy? Maybe something that isn't easy to disable?" The clerk seemed surprised by the question, but nodded. "We have this model that has a backup battery and can continue recording even if the power goes out. It also sends immediate alerts to your phone if it detects motion or if someone tries to tamper with it." As they purchased the camera, Elena made a silent vow to herself. She would not only protect Mateo from physical harm, but from the fear that was slowly eating away at his childhood. She would reclaim their home, their lives, and create a fortress where her son could finally feel safe again. Elena felt Mateo relax slightly beside her. "We'll take that one," she said without hesitation. Back home, Elena and Mateo spent the afternoon installing the camera. Elena tried to keep the atmosphere light, making it seem more like a game than a security measure. "All right, Agent Mateo," she said in a serious but playful voice. "Where do you think we should place our top-secret surveillance device?" Mateo looked around his room, considering carefully. "There!" he exclaimed, pointing to a corner near the window. "That way, we can see the whole room and the window." Elena nodded, impressed by her son's reasoning. "Excellent deduction, Agent. We'll proceed with the installation immediately." As Elena worked on mounting the camera, Mateo watched her intently. "Mama," he said suddenly, his voice serious, "do you think I'll ever feel normal again?" Elena stopped, turning to look at her son. "Oh, honey, I know everything seems difficult and scary right now, but I promise it will get better. You're the bravest boy I know, and together we'll get through this." Mateo nodded slowly. "And if I have more nightmares? Then I'll be here to hug you and remind you that you're safe," Elena replied. "And now we'll have our top-secret camera to make sure everything's all right." Once the camera was installed, Elena showed Mateo how they could view the live feed from her phone. "See? Now we can see your room anytime. And if anything happens, I'll get an alert right away." Mateo seemed relieved, but then he frowned. "Mama, what if the camera sees something bad?" Elena sat down on the bed, pulling Mateo towards her. "If the camera sees anything at all, I'll know right away. And I promise you, I won't let anything bad happen to you. Ever again." That night, as Elena tucked Mateo in, she noticed that he seemed calmer than he had been in weeks. "Do you feel safer now, honey?" she asked softly. Mateo nodded. "Yeah, but can you stay with me until I fall asleep?" "Of course," Elena said, settling down next to him. As Mateo drifted off to sleep, Elena couldn't help but think about everything they had been through. Guilt gnawed at her. How hadn't she realized sooner? How had she allowed this to happen? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing. It was a text from Maria. "How are you and Mateo doing? Carlos and I are worried. Do you need anything?" Elena sighed, grateful for her family's support. "We're doing better," she typed back quickly. "We installed a camera in Mateo's room today. He seems calmer. Thanks for your concern." She had barely sent the message when her phone rang. It was Carlos, her brother. "Elena," he said as soon as she answered, his voice filled with concern. How are you really doing? Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. I'm surviving, Carlos. It's hard, but Mateo needs me to be strong. I know, sis, Carlos replied gently, but you need to take care of yourself too. Have you considered talking to someone, a professional, I mean? Elena looked at Mateo, who was now sleeping soundly. I've been so focused on getting help from Mateo. I don't know, Carlos. Maybe you're right. Maria and I can help you find someone, Carlos offered. And you know we're here for you, whatever you need, right? Elena felt a wave of gratitude toward her brother. I know, Carlos. Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. After hanging up, Elena stayed awake for a long while, watching Mateo sleep and obsessively checking the camera feed on her phone. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Between Mateo's therapy sessions, meetings with lawyers, and constant vigilance, Elena barely had time to breathe. One afternoon, while waiting for Mateo to come out of his therapy session, Elena checked her phone for the 100th time. The camera feed showed Mateo's room, empty and quiet. Mrs. Valdez? Dr. Ramirez, Mateo's therapist, called out, breaking Elena out of her thoughts. Elena looked up. Yes? How was the session? Dr. Ramirez sat down across from her. Mateo's making progress, but I'm concerned about something he mentioned today. He said that he's afraid that the cameras won't be enough. Can you tell me more about that? Elena sighed, explaining briefly about the camera installation in Mateo's room. Dr. Ramirez nodded understandingly. I understand your intention, Elena, but we must be careful not to foster a dependence on external devices for safety. Mateo needs to develop a sense of inner security. Are you saying I should take the camera down? Elena asked, feeling a pang of anxiety at the thought. Not necessarily, the therapist replied, but perhaps we could work on gradually reducing his reliance on it. How about if we create a plan for Mateo to feel safe without needing to constantly check the camera? Elena nodded slowly, though the idea made her nervous. I suppose you're right. What do you suggest? As Dr. Ramirez explained some strategies, Mateo came out of the therapy room, his eyes immediately searching for Elena. Mama, he exclaimed, running towards her. Elena hugged him tightly. Hi, honey. How was your session? Mateo shrugged. It was okay. Can we go home now? I want to see the camera. Elena exchanged a look with Dr. Ramirez before answering. Of course, sweetie. But how about we go to the park first? It's a beautiful day to play for a bit. Mateo seemed to hesitate. But what if something happens while we're not home? Elena knelt down in front of him, looking him in the eye. Mateo, remember what we talked about? Our house is safe. No one can get in without us knowing. And remember, you're my brave secret agent. Secret agents need time to play and have fun too. After a moment, Mateo nodded slowly. Okay, but we can check the camera when we get home? Of course, Elena replied, feeling a mixture of relief and worry. At the park, Elena watched Mateo playing on the swings. At times, she saw glimpses of the happy, carefree boy he used to be. But every now and then, Mateo would look around nervously, as if expecting some danger to appear at any moment. Look how high I am, Mama, Mateo shouted from the swing. Elena smiled, waving back. I see you, honey. You're like a bird flying. At that moment, Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an alert from the security camera. Her heart raced as she opened the app with trembling hands. The feed showed Mateo's room, empty as they had left it. But something was moving at the window. Elena held her breath, zooming in. It was just a tree branch, swaying in the wind, knocking against the glass. Elena exhaled slowly, feeling the adrenaline leave her body. She realized she had been holding her breath. Mama? Mateo's voice startled her. Are you okay? You look scared. Elena quickly put her phone away, forcing a smile. I'm fine, honey, just checking some messages. Are you having fun? Mateo nodded, but his eyes flickered to her pocket where she had put her phone. Was it the camera? Did something happen? Elena hesitated, debating internally whether to tell Mateo the truth or shield him from further worry. Nothing important, my love, she said finally. Just a false alarm. Remember how we talked about how the camera can sometimes be confused? Mateo nodded slowly, but his expression remained worried. Can we go home now, Mama? I want to see for myself. Elena sighed, feeling the weight of the situation on her shoulders. Mateo, honey, Remember what Dr. Ramirez told us about not relying on the camera too much? But Mateo started to protest, his eyes welling up. Listen, Elena interrupted gently, kneeling down to be at eye level with her son. I know you're scared, and it's okay to be scared sometimes, but we also need to learn to feel safe without having to check the camera constantly. How about we make a deal? Mateo looked at her curiously. What kind of deal? Let's try to stay at the park for, say, 15 more minutes, Elena proposed. If after that time you still want to go home and check, we will. But during those 15 minutes, we're going to play and have fun without thinking about the camera. What do you say? Mateo seemed to consider it for a moment, biting his lower lip. And what if something bad happens while we're here? Elena took his hands in hers. Mateo, look at me. We're safe here. We're together. And I promise, I won't let anything bad happen to you. Ever again. Do you trust me? After a long moment, Mateo nodded slowly. Okay, Mama. 15 minutes. That's my brave boy. Elena smiled, kissing his forehead. Now how about a race to the slides? As they played, Elena noticed how Mateo gradually relaxed, laughing and running like he hadn't done in weeks. Yet she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Was she doing the right thing by pulling him away from the security the camera provided? Or was she feeding an unhealthy dependence? 15 minutes turned into 20, then 30. To Elena's surprise, it was she who had to remind Mateo that it was time to leave. We're leaving already? Mateo asked, sounding almost disappointed. Elena couldn't help but smile. Yes, my love. It's getting dark, and we need to make dinner. Do you want to check the camera when we get home? Mateo seemed to think about it for a moment. Can we have pizza for dinner? Elena blinked, surprised by his change of subject. Of course, but don't you want to check the camera first? Mateo shrugged. I guess if something bad had happened, we would know by now, right? Elena felt her heart swell with pride and relief. That's right, my brave boy. That's right. On the way home, Elena couldn't help but reflect on the progress they had made that day. It was a small step, but a significant one. Upon arriving home, Mateo ran straight to the kitchen. Come on, Mama, we got to make the pizza. Elena followed him, laughing. I'm coming. What toppings do you want on your pizza, Chef Mateo? As they made dinner together, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally turning a corner. The camera had given them a much-needed sense of security, but it was their growing trust in each other, their shared strength and resilience, that would truly set them free. Elena noticed that Mateo hadn't mentioned the camera, not even once. However, when it was time for bed, his anxiety seemed to return. Mama, Mateo said quietly as Elena tucked him in. Can we check the camera now? Elena nodded, taking out her phone. Of course, my love. See? Everything is quiet and safe. Mateo studied the screen for a moment before nodding. Okay. Good night, Mama. Good night, my brave boy, Elena replied, kissing his forehead. Remember, I'm right next door if you need me. That night, as Elena was getting ready for bed, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of hope and anxiety. They had taken a big step today, but she knew the road to recovery would be long and arduous. Just as she was about to get into bed, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. With a racing heart, Elena opened it. I'm watching you. You and the boy. This isn't over. Elena felt the world stop around her. With trembling hands, she dialed her brother's number. Carlos, she said as soon as he answered, her voice cracking with fear. I need your help. It's Roberto. He's back. Elena didn't sleep a wink that night. Every creak of the house, every shadow that moved outside the window, made her jump. She kept her eyes glued to her phone screen, alternating between the camera feed in Mateo's room and Roberto's menacing message. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the window, Elena heard Mateo's soft footsteps approaching her room. Mama? Mateo whispered, peeking his head through the door. Are you awake? Elena sat up quickly, forcing a smile. Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well? Mateo nodded, coming into the room and climbing onto the bed beside her. Yeah, I didn't have any nightmares last night. That's wonderful, honey, Elena said, hugging him tightly. For a moment, she considered telling Mateo about Roberto's message, but quickly dismissed the idea. She couldn't plunge him back into that fear. Mama, Mateo said suddenly, looking at her with concern. Did you sleep? You look tired. Elena bit her lip, debating internally what to say. Finally, she decided to be honest, at least partially. The truth is, I didn't sleep very well, honey. I was a little worried about some things at work. Mateo frowned. Is that why you have your phone in your hand? Were you watching the camera all night? Elena was surprised by her son's perceptiveness. Yes, I was. But I shouldn't have been, right? Remember what we talked about yesterday, about not relying too much on the camera? Mateo nodded solemnly. Doctor, Ramirez says we have to learn to feel safe without the camera. Maybe we could try that together. Elena felt tears pricking her eyes. You're very brave, Mateo. You're right. We should try it together. How about we leave the phone at home today and go to the park again? Without the camera? Mateo asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Without the camera, Elena confirmed. We'll be like secret agents on a special mission. What do you say? Mateo seemed to consider it for a moment, then nodded with determination. Okay, but can we call Uncle Carlos to come with us? Elena felt a wave of relief. Carlos's presence would make her feel safer, especially after Roberto's message. That's an excellent idea, my love. I'll call your uncle after breakfast. As they made breakfast together, Elena noticed that Mateo seemed more relaxed than he had been in weeks. He was humming a song as he spread jam on his toast. You seem happy today, Elena remarked. Mateo smiled. I don't know. I feel brave today, Mama. Like I can do anything. Elena felt her heart swell with pride. That's because you are brave, my love. You're the bravest boy I know. After breakfast, Elena called Carlos while Mateo got dressed for the park. Elena, Carlos's voice sounded worried. Are you okay? Did something else happen after your message last night? Elena glanced towards Mateo's room to make sure he couldn't hear. No, nothing else. But I'm terrified, Carlos. I don't know what to do. I've already spoken to the police, Carlos said. They're going to increase patrols in your neighborhood, and they're trying to trace the number that sent you the message. Elena sighed. Thank you, Carlos. Listen, Mateo and I are going to the park today. Could you come with us? I don't want Mateo to suspect anything, but I would feel safer if you were there. Of course, Carlos replied without hesitation. I'll be at your house in 20 minutes. When Carlos arrived, Mateo was thrilled. Uncle Carlos, you're coming to the park with us? Carlos smiled, ruffling his nephew's hair. Of course, champ. Wouldn't miss a chance to play with my favorite nephew. As they walked to the park, Elena couldn't help but constantly look over her shoulder, searching for any sign of Roberto. Relax, Carlos whispered, noticing her nervousness. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you. Elena felt a surge of gratitude for her brother's presence. At the park, Mateo ran toward the swings. Look how high I can go, Uncle Carlos. Carlos laughed. Wow, you're almost reaching the clouds, champ. As Mateo played, Elena and Carlos sat on a nearby bench. How's she really doing? Carlos asked quietly. Elena sighed. She has her ups and downs. Yesterday was a good day, but... Carlos, I'm scared. What if Roberto makes good on his threat? What if he hurts Mateo again? Carlos took his sister's hand. We won't let him, Elena. We're all in this together. Roberto won't get near you or Mateo. Suddenly, Mateo's shout startled them. Mama, Uncle Carlos, look! Elena and Carlos jumped to their feet, their hearts pounding. But Mateo was just pointing at a dog passing by. It's just like the dog we wanted to adopt. Remember, Mama? Elena exhaled slowly, the adrenaline leaving her body. Yes, my love. It does look a lot like him. Carlos looked at his sister with concern. Elena, you can't keep going on like this. You're on the verge of a nervous breakdown. What else can I do, Carlos? Elena whispered, frustrated. I have to protect Mateo. And you are, Carlos replied. But you also need to take care of yourself. Have you considered, seeking professional help too? Elena bit her lip. I've thought about it, but I don't know if I can afford it right now. Between Mateo's sessions and the legal fees. Let me help, Carlos interrupted. Maria and I can cover the cost of your therapy. Please, Elena, we need you strong. Before Elena could reply, Mateo came running back towards them. Mama, can we get ice cream? Elena forced a smile. Of course, my love. What flavor do you want? As they walked toward the ice cream stand, Elena noticed a man in a baseball cap watching them from a distance. Her heart quickened. "Carlos," she whispered, clutching her brother's arm. "That man. Do you think it could be?" Carlos followed her gaze. "Stay here with Mateo. I'll go check it out." "No!" Elena gripped her brother's arm tighter. "Don't go near him. Please, let's just leave." Carlos nodded, understanding his sister's fear. "Okay, let's go home." Back at the house, Mateo noticed the tension in the air. "Mama, did something bad happen at the park?" Elena exchanged a look with Carlos before answering. "No, honey. We were just a little tired and decided to come home." Mateo didn't seem convinced. "It's because of the man in the cap. I saw you looking at him, Mama." Elena froze. How could she explain this to her son without frightening him further? "Mateo, remember when we were playing secret agents?" Carlos intervened. "Sometimes agents have to be aware of their surroundings. Your mama was just practicing her observation skills." Mateo seemed to consider this for a moment. "Oh, I get it. I can practice too." Elena forced a smile. "Of course you can, my love. But remember, a good secret agent also knows when to relax and have fun." That night, after putting Mateo to bed, Elena and Carlos sat in the living room. "I can't keep going on like this, Carlos," Elena said, her voice breaking with exhaustion and fear. "Every shadow, every noise. I feel like I'm going crazy." Carlos hugged her tightly. "You're not alone in this, Elena. Listen, I've been thinking, how about you and Mateo move in with Maria and me for a while? We have plenty of room, and that way, you and Mateo would be safer." Elena considered the offer for a moment. "I don't know, Carlos. I don't want to be a burden. And besides, wouldn't it be like letting Roberto win? Like showing him that he has power over us?" "This isn't about winning or losing, Elena," Carlos replied gently. "This is about keeping you and Mateo safe while we figure this out. Think about it, okay?" Before Elena could reply, her phone vibrated. It was another message from the unknown number. "Nice day at the park. Mateo's gotten so big." Elena felt the world stop around her. With trembling hands, she showed the message to Carlos. He was there," she whispered, the panic evident in her voice. "He was watching us the whole time." Carlos took the phone, his face hardening. "This is it. I'm calling the police right now, and you and Mateo are coming to my house tonight. No arguments." Elena felt too frightened to protest. While Carlos spoke to the police, Elena went to Mateo's room. She found him asleep, clutching his favorite teddy bear, one where she would be in charge, not fear. As she tucked Mateo's clothes into a suitcase, Elena noticed something at the back of the closet. It was the security camera they had installed just a few days ago. She picked it up, considering it for a moment. "We don't need you anymore," she murmured, packing the camera into the suitcase. "We're stronger than this." Just as she was closing the suitcase, she heard a noise coming from the window. Her heart skipped a beat, but then she remembered her newfound resolve. With determined steps, she marched over to the window and pulled the curtains open with a flourish. No one was there, just the wind rustling the branches of a nearby tree. Elena exhaled slowly, a small smile playing on her lips. "You won't scare me anymore, Roberto. Not anymore." She rejoined Mateo, sitting down on the edge of his bed. She gazed at her son's peaceful face, remembering all the times she had seen him smile, laugh, cry, every precious moment they had shared. "I love you more than anything in the world, Mateo," she whispered, "and I promise we'll get through this, stronger, together." With that promise sealed in her heart, Elena prepared to face whatever came next. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, but she was ready to walk it step by step, with her son by her side and her family supporting her. The night passed without further incident, and when the first rays of sun began to illuminate the room, Elena was already awake, ready to start her new day with renewed determination. The next morning, Elena gently woke Mateo. "Good morning, my brave boy," she whispered. "I have a surprise for you." Mateo rubbed his sleepy eyes. "What surprise, Mama?" "We're going on vacation," Elena replied with a smile. "With Uncle Carlos and Aunt Maria. How does that sound?" Mateo's eyes lit up. "Really? Awesome!" As they were getting ready to leave, Elena's phone rang. It was the detective in charge of the case. Mrs. Valdez, he said, his voice serious but with a hint of relief. We have good news. We've located and apprehended Roberto. He won't be bothering you anymore. Elena felt an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. Tears of relief streamed down her cheeks as she hugged Mateo. What is it, Mama? Mateo asked, concerned. Elena knelt down in front of him, taking his small hands in hers. Mateo, my love, remember how I promised you we would be safe? Well, that promise has been fulfilled. The bad man who was scaring us, he can't hurt us anymore. Mateo's eyes widened. Really? We don't have to be scared anymore? Really? Really, Elena nodded, hugging him tightly. Now we can start over, my brave boy. Together. Just then, Carlos and Maria arrived. Seeing the tears in Elena's eyes, Carlos grew concerned. What is it? Elena smiled through her tears. It's over, Carlos. The police caught Roberto. We're free. The family came together in a group hug, tears of joy and relief mingling. You know what? Maria said after a moment. I think this calls for a celebration. How about we all go to the beach together for a few days? Yeah, Mateo shouted, jumping up and down. We can build sandcastles and swim in the ocean. Elena looked at her son, her heart overflowing with love and hope. For the first time in a long time, she saw the happy, carefree boy that Mateo used to be. Sounds perfect, she said, kissing her son's forehead. It's time to create some new happy memories. As they were loading up the car for their impromptu beach getaway, Elena looked back at her house. It was no longer a place of fear, but a reminder of their strength and courage. Ready to go, Mama? Mateo asked, taking her hand. Elena smiled, squeezing her son's hand gently. Ready, my brave boy. I'm ready for whatever comes next as long as we're together. And so, with the sun shining on them and a future full of hope ahead, Elena and Mateo embarked on their fresh start, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle life threw their way. My brave boy, she whispered, gently stroking his hair. I promise I'll keep you safe, no matter what it takes. As she watched her son sleep, Elena made a decision. No matter how scared she was, no matter how difficult it would be, she would do whatever it took to protect Mateo, even if that meant facing her own fears head-on. Roberto, she thought, a fierce determination replacing the fear in her eyes. You have no idea who you're messing with. This mama bear will protect her cub, no matter the cost. With that resolve in mind, Elena started quietly packing Mateo's things. Tomorrow, a new chapter in their lives would begin.